when Ron asked me to do these things, I sort of say, well, you must have a reason for doing it. I have very little wisdom when I'm looking around this room right here. So obviously it was intended, and I think that it's only Ron that really knows why he's putting me up here to talk to you when I should be sitting there listening to you. Anyways, let me share with you the information that I'd like to. As Ron mentioned, presently I work at the hospital here. Before that, I did work at the treatment center in Kahnawake. And before that, I also had the opportunity to work at the Assembly of First Nations, the office in Ottawa, and I had the opportunity to work in the health portfolio. Part of the good parts about that was I had the opportunity to do a lot of community health development across our land. And through my travels, I think I've had the opportunity to go to approximately 330 of our communities, our First Nation communities. And what I want to bring back to you today are just those things that I keep on finding that are common, whether we're here in the Mohawk Territory, whether we're in the Algonquin Territory, whether we're with the Ojibways, or the Crees, or the Dene in the Northwest Territories, or the Athabascans up in the Yukon. A lot of the things that people talk about, it's all the same, and it all relates to Native spirituality. Just one little point. When I was up in the Northwest Territories, I was in a place called Ray. Ray is about 90 miles outside of Yellowknife. And I was at a conference, a health conference. And all of a sudden, through the second day, I had a very warm-hearted gentleman who sort of took a liking to me. And he was about, I would say he was between 85 and 90. And he was the most active person I can remember. But what he did was he says, "This is your first time here. I want you to come with me." So I got in his truck. The guy booted around like he was 16 years old. Took me about 30 miles outside of the community, and he took me to the mouth of where the Great Slave Lake enters into the Mackenzie River. And it's an awesome sight because the water is just starting to flow at a quicker pace. And when he got there, the first thing he said to me was, "I come over here when I have to think about healing myself," because he says a lot of times I start getting bad thoughts. I start getting angry at people in our community. I start thinking bad things about what the non-natives have done to us. But he says I have to come here, and he says I have to sit just to listen to the sound of the river, to be able to hear what's really inside of me. I'm a part of this river, and I'm a part of this land. And what I really learned after we were driving back was the person was very uncomfortable. He was very uptight, and it was something that had happened within his own family. And his opportunity to take me there was to try and share a little something. And that little something is something that I'll never forget, because it taught me that yes, there is peace. And the most important thing that I can see within our own Mohawk values are 4 points that keep on coming up. And basically they are, the first one is always peace. We have to do things with a good mind. We have to do things with peace in mind. What that means is we're not going to do any harm to anybody. That's a traditional value, and I think if you go through the great law of peace, you'll find that exactly what it is. Peace is the first value. The second value is respect. We have to respect everybody the same way that we want them to respect us. And again, it's right in the great law. It's a matter of looking at it. Third point, besides peace and respect, is also to have a good mind. A good mind means that we're looking positively, we're looking creatively, and we're not looking at trying to get our own personal gain or trying to make ourselves look better. It's to help everybody in our community. And that's what came out. And the fourth important point that keeps on coming out again in our values is the issue of responsibility. If we want to get things done, we have to start it. Whether it's healing ourselves, whether it's starting to get initiatives going, we have to take the responsibility, and we can't say, well, somebody else is going to do it. Let those guys handle it. If we do that, we're going out of mix with our own values. Those were the ideas that I captured. Peace, respect, good mind, and responsibility are Mohawk values that we all have to maintain. What I also found going across all of Canada and parts of the United States is that when you want to talk with our people, you have to talk very simply in a circle. Anything you want to talk about, if you can put it in a circle, people will understand it a lot easier. And a good example is our own life cycles. When we start off and when we're children, what happens is we're starting off at a point, and maybe the first 3 hours of a clock would be basically our childhood, our infancy. Good example too is the little one that's sitting over there. Oh, you can see like she's not worried at all. She has complete freedom. She's looking around and seeing what's going on, and she's wondering now what's happening. This is a good example of what's happening. When you're a child, basically you're at total peace, you have total freedom, and basically you always rely on the support of others, older people. That's a good example of what happens in our life cycle. And even before that, when we're born, birth is a celebration. Everybody is aware of that. As children start to grow, when you go in your youth, when you go into your childhood and your infancy, you're starting to become aware of things. From your infancy, you go basically into your childhood. In your childhood, you start making more decisions. When you make more decisions, it's what can I eat? What can I do? What can I see? Today's world, what can I watch on TV? Do I watch the Flintstones or the Jetsons? What it really boils down to is there's a development of starting to make our own decisions. As you keep on going down, from infancy you become into a young adult. And in a young adult you're still learning. You're starting to make your decisions which are going to affect more of your entire life. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? Am I going to go on to school? Am I going to take a trade? Am I going to be an iron worker? Am I going to be an auto mechanic? And these decisions are a little bit more important than when we were smaller. But really what goes on is it's like it's a rite of passage. We've all gone through it, we've all experienced it, and the young people are going through that same thing that we've gone through. After we go through that young adulthood, we enter into what is adulthood. And again, if you're talking in a clock, right now we're almost at the bottom, between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock. What's going on in our adulthood is we're making now decisions on how to assist the younger people that are coming up. We're also making decisions to make sure that we assist the people that are before us, that have brought us up. These are common links, so there's always a tie-in. And that keeps on going around in this idea of a circle. And in the last part of the circle is basically what people call is when you're an elder. When you've reached an age where there's wisdom that you can share, where in fact there are items that you can share stories of what's happened. What you want to do is you want to make sure what you've learned you share with other people so that they can have an oral history, that they can have an understanding. And at the same time, you try and make sure that those people are basically gaining the values that all of us have. Peace, respect, good mind, and responsibility. So that's the example of what we have when we see a life cycle. The most important thing, though, never to forget is where we begin, it's a celebration. When death comes, death is often related with sorrow, and it is because we will no longer be with the person. But the other way to look at it is that death is in fact a celebration. Because although the person is no longer with us, the person is now with the Creator. And it's very important with that because it ties in. It's a circle. I think too many times even if we look across the room, we have the 4 circles all around Kahnawake Hall. We have the 4 circles in our churches. What exactly does it imply? It implies that there's a cycle. And the most important thing that we have to do is maintain our own stability. We have to make sure that what we're doing is in goodness, is in comfort, and making sure we can share with other people. A lot of times, too, a lot of our people tend to feel uncomfortable, tend not to really know who they are. Most of my life, my first 18 years growing up, I grew up in Detroit. And I says, along with my cousin Tom, who's sitting over there. Tom, raise your hand. This guy too. We used to follow the Detroit Tigers all the time. It was only when we were 16 we found out we weren't black because we couldn't dance. What it boils down to is you get to experience other people, you get to find out a lot about things, and you get to feel comfortable because you know who you are. I had the opportunity too to have a very good father and a mother, and basically we've learned a lot through them. I had a very good aunt and uncle growing up there, right there in Detroit with me. They always impressed upon us the importance of being a Mohawk from Kahnawake. That was so special. And in fact, that specialty has never been lost. The other aspect too is every summer and every Christmas we would come back over here, make sure that our tie-in is right with our community. And a matter of fact, there was no difference whether you spent your fall and your school year away and you came back over here, because we were all one big family. And I think a lot of times in our changing community now, that seems to get lost a little. I think it's important that we take our responsibility to make sure that everybody feels again that we're one and we're together. That's the most important aspect. Because there's so many good things that are happening. When I was at the treatment center, as Ron said, during the crisis in '90, where there was a lot more uncomfortable feelings, the one thing that I kept on thinking about while I was here in Kahnawake and unable to get into Kahnawake was that the treatment center there, it's exactly what Ron had said. There's peace, there's tranquility, there's serenity there. And no matter what had happened, it always felt as if our Creator and our God was watching over all of this. And a lot of times too, when we think about it, the treatment center, as well as the one in Kahnawake or in Partridge, in Akwesasne, basically they're healing places. And the whole thing is when people understand alcoholism, what really goes on, it's not a question of telling everybody, well, this is what alcohol is a disease, you got to be careful, don't use it anymore. That's not really what rehabilitation is about. Rehabilitation is about understanding who you are, making sure you're one with yourself, making sure you understand that there's a power stronger than yours. Basically, that's our spirituality. And to express that spirituality, it comes from within us. Each one of us is spiritual, and our spirituality is right here within us. The one thing that I always think about is our definition of spirituality, native spirituality, is to be positive and to be creative. Anybody who is positive and creative is spiritual. And the way that I look at it a lot, think of something or someone that is not spiritual. That is basically, what is the opposite of positive? That's something that's negative. And what is the opposite of creative? Something that's destructive. We all have the opportunity, thank you, John. We all have the opportunity to be able to understand that. There are two things. The spirituality is within us. How we make it grow is for ourselves to decide. That's the responsibility. How we share it, that's again how we do things. Within the alcohol, within AA, within CA and the other support groups, there's basically a common thread, and that thread is we have to walk our talk. In other words, what we're saying, we have to show in our actions. And I think a lot of this whole, what we're doing right here, shows that we're more than just giving lip service. Over time, a lot of our people have had difficulties in understanding who they are. If we're like that, we have to give the opportunity to make sure that people know who they are. And I call on all of you here. A lot of you have a lot more wisdom and experience than I have. If you are able to use that in any way to make one person a better person, basically we've accomplished something. And a lot of times in the addiction setting, the big word is basically work at things one day at a time. The idea is yes, you make a goal and you try and shoot for that, but you never lose sight of that you're here right now and you work for now. You have a plan, but make sure that you work on it every day. And you make sure that yourself, you're healed inside, and you make sure that you don't get overpowered by other emotions, by hatred, by the feeling of loneliness or depression. Because if you do, you fall right back into that trap of that disease. And I think over time, I've had the opportunity to learn all of this. There's nothing that's unusual. It's just a matter of making sure that everybody is aware. I think too, last month I had the opportunity to share with Rita McCumber, who was sitting in the back. Rita gave a very good presentation at one of the colleges here in Montreal. And the most important thing that she kept on sharing to a non-Indian, a non-native audience, was just the importance of making sure you know who you are. The more that you know who you are, the more that you're able to share with other people. Isn't that what spirituality is about? it's so simple that a lot of times we get lost where we're trying to figure out, well, what does it mean? What does it mean to be a Mohawk from Kahnawake or a Mohawk from Akwesasne? Or what does it mean to be whoever you are from whatever your cultural background is? A lot of times people get confused because they see all these new advances coming up. Everybody wants a VCR and a satellite. Those are parts of a culture. But the important thing is that the culture comes from within. And the way we learn what comes from within is what we learn from people like yourselves, like my parents, like my grandparents, who I've never had the opportunity to meet. In fact, a lot of you here, I see you as my grandparents. It's very important that we look at that not just as a family being myself and my wife Jackie and my 2 kids. That's not it. And my mother and father. It's more than that. It's this whole community. If we can learn one thing new, then basically we've accomplished something because we've shared something very important, ourselves with other people. So in fact, that's the focus that I look at a lot of times. If we look at things in a circle, we have to balance everything. We have to balance the good with the bad. We have to balance our actions with our words. We have to make sure that if we keep that balance, we're going to be on the right road. But a lot of times we don't think about that right road because most of the people think, well, what's spirituality? Spirituality means you got to go to a church. Spirituality means you got to go to a synagogue. Basically, no. Spirituality is right here. And the method on how we want to share our spirituality, that's secondary. What's more importantly is what we have inside of us. If people understand that, then there's no problem about failing to see, well, I'm of one religion and these other people are of another religion. It's all the same. The important thing is how we look at it and how we impact positively and creatively on other people. Well, I think that those are my thoughts for now. I think if there are anything that I can share with you later on, I'll always be over here. And like I said, I think Ron, a lot of times in his wondrous and mysterious ways, usually gets things done. And why he got me up here, beyond me. Thank you very much. Have a good day.